Under the cold lights of the city, a strange girl sat quietly near the corner of a street. Her clothes were torn and dusty, her small hands pressed together for warmth. Most people passed without a glance. She was different. Her ears were pointed and soft like a fox, and her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. No one knew where she came from, and she never spoke of it. The people in the neighborhood only called her the Silent Girl. Every night, she stayed near the same broken streetlight, where the sound of cars faded into the distance and the wind carried the smell of food from faraway restaurants. She had learned to live alone. In the early morning, she searched trash bins behind cafes, sometimes finding a half sandwich or cold soup. When she was lucky, a kind shopkeeper left out a piece of bread for her. She never begged, never asked for help. She simply bowed her head in thanks and went back to her corner. Her world was quiet. No home, no family, just the sounds of footsteps and engines. Sometimes she watched the people who walked by. She noticed the children laughing, their hands warm in their parents' grip. She didn't understand why her chest ached when she saw them. She didn't remember her own family. Only flashes of bright light, metal walls, and strange voices that echoed inside her mind. Sometimes when she closed her eyes, she saw stars and felt as if she was falling through them. Then she would wake up trembling, afraid that she might forget the stars completely one day. One evening, the wind was colder than usual. The sky was heavy with clouds, and few people walked the streets. The girl huddled against a wall, wrapping her thin scarf tightly around her neck. A black car stopped across the street. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a dark coat with a shining pin on his chest that caught the streetlight. He looked important. 2 guards followed him, one holding an umbrella. They spoke in a language she did not know, but their calm voices made her curious. The man seemed to be in a hurry. He pulled out a phone, talking fast as he crossed toward the tall building that stood like a fortress. The embassy. The girl watched him carefully. When he turned the corner, something slipped from his pocket and fell near the gutter. It was a small black object. The car's lights flashed once, then it drove away, leaving the object lying in the cold rainwater. The girl waited a few seconds, making sure no one else noticed. Then she stood up, her bare feet splashing in the puddles, and walked closer. It was a wallet made of smooth leather with golden letters carved on it. She turned it in her hand and saw a shiny card inside that read, Ambassador David Hensley. She didn't know what ambassador meant, but she could tell it was important. The wallet was heavy, full of papers and cards. There were pictures, too. A smiling woman and 2 children standing by a lake. The girl looked at them for a long time. They looked happy. She felt a strange warmth in her chest, something between pain and comfort. Then she looked at the embassy gates ahead. Tall guards stood by the doors, their uniforms perfect, their faces cold. For a long moment she stood still. She could walk away. The wallet would buy her food for weeks if she sold it. But something inside her said no. She remembered the picture of the smiling family. Maybe that man missed them. Maybe this wallet was something important to him. She took a deep breath, clutching it close to her chest, and began to walk toward the tall gates. As she approached, the guards noticed her and stepped forward. Their expressions changed when they saw her strange ears and ragged clothes. One of them said something sharply. She couldn't understand, but his tone made her step back. She tried to hold up the wallet to show them, but they shook their heads, waving her away. The girl felt her heart beat faster. She wanted to speak, but her throat tightened. She hadn't spoken in days. Her voice had grown weak. Finally, she whispered, "For him," and pointed to the building. Her words were broken, but one guard paused, frowning. He took the wallet from her hand and looked at it. The golden initials matched the name tag on the Diplomat's door. He exchanged a few quick words with the other guard, then told her to wait. She stood there, wet and shaking, while people passing by stared at her as if she didn't belong anywhere. Minutes later, the tall man she had seen earlier came out. He looked serious but not unkind. The guard handed him the wallet, speaking quickly. The man's eyes widened when he saw it. He looked at the girl and asked softly, "You found this?" His voice was calm, but his eyes were full of curiosity. The girl nodded slowly. The man smiled for a moment, then looked at the guards. "Bring her inside," he said. The guards looked unsure, but they obeyed. She followed them through the large iron gates, her small steps echoing on the marble floor inside. Warm air brushed against her face. The place smelled clean, almost too clean. She felt dizzy from the sudden change. The man turned to her again. "What is your name?" he asked kindly. The girl only lowered her eyes. She had no name to give. He looked puzzled but not angry. "All right," he said gently. "You did something very good today." He reached into the wallet and pulled out a small note. "I could have lost everything important inside this." "Thank you." The girl blinked in confusion. No one had ever said thank you to her before. She didn't know how to respond. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. He noticed her hesitation and turned to one of his aides. "Get her some food and something warm to wear," he said quietly. "She must be freezing," the aide hesitated. "Sir, I know," the man interrupted softly. "She's a child and she helped me. That's enough." They led her into a small side room with a heater and a clean blanket. A woman brought her a bowl of hot soup and bread. The girl sat on the floor staring at it for a long time before taking a cautious sip. The warmth filled her empty stomach and made her eyes sting with tears she didn't understand. Through the half-open door, she saw the diplomat speaking with his staff, still holding the wallet she had found. He smiled as he looked toward her, as if she had reminded him that kindness still existed in the world. That night, for the first time in a very long while, the girl didn't sleep under a broken streetlight or inside a cardboard box. She lay on a small couch in a quiet room, her hand still clutching the blanket like a treasure. The hum of the heater was soft and steady, and outside the window snow began to fall. She didn't know it yet, but returning that wallet would be the moment her lonely life began to change. Somewhere in the city, an unknown fate had started moving for the little alien girl who once had nothing, except the courage to do the right thing. Morning light entered through the thin curtains and touched the girl's face. She opened her eyes slowly, unsure where she was. The air felt warm and soft, not like the cold streets she was used to. For a few seconds, she thought she was dreaming. Then she saw the small heater, the clean blanket, and a tray with bread and fruit beside her. She sat up quickly, her ears twitching at the quiet hum of voices outside the door. The memories from last night came back. The man with the golden pin, the guards, the wallet. She remembered his calm face and gentle voice. She didn't know his name, but she remembered the letters on the card inside the wallet. Ambassador David Hensley. She whispered the word David under her breath, trying to say it correctly. Her voice was rough and small. A woman opened the door, smiling kindly. She carried folded clothes and a towel. "Good morning, little one," the woman said in a soft tone. "The ambassador wants to see you when you're ready." The girl didn't fully understand, but she nodded. The woman showed her a small bathroom where she could wash. The warm water felt strange but comforting. She scrubbed the dirt from her hands and face, watching the color of her skin return. Her reflection in the mirror startled her. Her pale eyes glowed faintly even in daylight, and her small ears twitched slightly when she moved. She touched them, then looked away quickly. She didn't want to see how different she looked. The clean clothes were simple, soft cotton pants, a white shirt, and a small blue sweater. They were too big for her, but she didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt warm. The woman led her through long halls lined with flags and framed pictures. People turned to look at her as she walked by, whispering to each other. She felt shy and kept her eyes on the floor until they entered a bright office where the man from last night stood near a desk full of papers. "Good morning," David said, smiling. "I'm glad you're awake." The girl nodded quietly. He motioned for her to sit on the sofa across from him. "Do you remember me?" he asked kindly. She hesitated, then said softly, "Wallet." He laughed lightly. "Yes, you found my wallet, and I'm very thankful for that." He paused, studying her. "What's your name?" The girl stayed silent. She looked down at her hands. He leaned forward slightly. "You don't have one?" She shook her head. He sighed gently. "All right, that's okay. We'll find one for you later." He spoke with a tone that reminded her of calm music. "You did something very honest. You could have taken the money and run away, but you didn't. That means you have a good heart." The girl didn't completely understand, but his warm smile made her relax a little. He poured her a cup of milk and slid a plate of bread across the table. "Eat. You're safe here." She ate slowly, her small hands trembling slightly as she lifted the bread. The warmth from the drink spread through her chest. She had eaten many things from trash bins before, but never something clean and fresh. David watched her quietly. He could see she was cautious but not wild. Her manners were natural, her movements gentle. Where do you come from? He asked softly. She looked at him confused. Far, she whispered. Far. She nodded. Sky broke. Light gone, he frowned. The words made little sense, but the sadness in her tone was clear. The sky broke? He repeated almost to himself. Maybe she meant a crash, an accident. He had read about strange sightings recently near the mountains, but he pushed the thought aside. When she finished eating, he said, You can stay here for a while. I'll make sure you're safe. Her eyes widened. Stay? Yes, he said. Stay, until we know more about you. She didn't answer, but her small nod was enough. For the rest of the day, she explored the small guest room they gave her. The window overlooked the embassy garden, filled with green trees and fountains. She sat by the window for hours, watching birds move across the sky. Every time she saw one, her fingers twitched as if she wanted to follow. In the afternoon, David came by again. He brought a small notebook and a pencil. Do you know how to write? He asked. She shook her head. That's all right. We'll learn. He drew a small picture of the sun and said, Sun. She repeated the word softly. He smiled. Good. You learn fast. Each day that followed, he taught her small words. Sun, sky, water, light, thank you. She repeated them carefully, her accent gentle and musical. The embassy staff grew used to seeing her sitting quietly in a corner with a notebook, copying words with careful strokes. But not everyone approved. One afternoon, as David was leaving his office, one of the senior staff members approached him. Sir, may I speak frankly? The man asked. David nodded. She's not human, sir. We don't know what she is or where she came from. It's dangerous to keep her here. People are starting to talk, David sighed. I know what they're saying, but she's just a child. Look at her. Does she look dangerous to you? That's not the point, sir. The media could... I'll handle it, David said firmly. She's staying. That evening, he brought her a small plush toy, a stuffed fox with soft ears. For you, he said. She held it gently, her eyes wide with wonder. Mine? Yes, yours. She hugged it tightly. Thank you, she said in a shaky voice. It was the first time she had spoken a full sentence to him. David smiled, feeling something in his chest shift, a warmth he hadn't felt since his own daughter left for school abroad. As night came, she sat near the window again, looking out at the stars. David watched her from the doorway. Her glowing eyes reflected the night sky, and for a brief moment he felt as if he was staring at a piece of another world. He whispered quietly, Where did you come from, little one? She didn't hear him. She was too busy tracing the stars with her finger against the glass. In the quiet of the embassy, surrounded by walls of marble and light, the girl who once slept on cold concrete now had a name waiting to be found, a voice learning to speak, and a man who had started to care more than he expected. What began as a lost wallet had turned into something neither of them could explain, a bond that would soon touch hearts far beyond the walls of that building. Days turned into weeks, and the strange girl slowly became part of the embassy's quiet rhythm. Every morning, she sat by the window with her notebook, practicing the simple words Ambassador David had taught her. Her handwriting was shaky, but her memory was sharp. She could remember any word after seeing it once. The staff began to notice her soft manners and how quickly she learned new things. Still, many whispered behind her back, calling her the alien child or the street girl. She didn't understand the words, but she could feel their coldness. David, however, was patient with her. He treated her as if she were his own daughter. He often said, Lyra, you have a light inside you. The name Lyra was one he had chosen for her, taken from a constellation he once saw through a telescope. At first she had been confused by it, but when he explained that it meant light in an old language, she accepted it quietly. From then on, whenever someone asked her name, she would touch her chest and say softly, Lyra. Lyra began helping around the embassy. She swept the small garden, arranged papers, and handed letters to the staff. Though she couldn't read them, she remembered every symbol. When someone dropped something, she picked it up before they even noticed. Her quiet helpfulness slowly softened the hearts of some workers. One of the cooks, a kind woman named Elena, started giving her warm milk every morning. Lyra always smiled shyly and said, Thank you. One day, David invited a doctor to examine her. She's been through a lot, he said. I want to be sure she's healthy. The doctor, an older man with round glasses, looked surprised when Lyra entered the room. Her glowing eyes caught the light, and her soft ears twitched slightly as she sat. He checked her heartbeat, her reflexes, her temperature. Everything seemed normal except one thing. Her pulse was slower than a normal human's. He looked at David with curiosity. "She's perfectly fine," the doctor said, "but her biology isn't quite like ours." David crossed his arms. "Meaning?" "She might not be from here," the doctor said carefully. "Not from this world, I mean." Lyra looked between them, sensing their unease. David smiled to comfort her. "She's from here now," he said softly. "That's what matters." After that, he refused to let anyone else test her. When scientists later contacted the embassy after hearing rumors about the alien girl, he politely declined every request. "She's not an experiment," he told them firmly. "She's a child who showed honesty when no one else would." As the days went on, Lyra started speaking more clearly. Her sentences were short, but her tone was gentle and sure. She often asked about simple things. Why flowers close at night? Or why people hurry always? David always answered with patience. Sometimes when they walked through the garden, she looked up at the sky and whispered strange words in a language he didn't recognize. "What did you say?" he asked once. She smiled softly. "Song of home," she replied. Her words stayed with him for a long time. One rainy afternoon, a newspaper reporter came to the embassy gate. He had heard of the girl and wanted an interview. "The public loves these kinds of stories," the reporter said eagerly. "A lost alien, a kind ambassador, it's good press." David shook his head. "No interviews," he said. "She's just a child, not a story for your papers." But the news spread anyway. Someone from the staff had mentioned her to a friend, and soon, photos of her from a distance appeared online. People all over the city began to talk. Some admired her honesty. Others were afraid of her difference. When Lyra saw her picture on a phone screen one day, she looked confused. "Why people see me?" she asked. "Because they're curious," David said. "You're special," she thought for a moment. "Special? Good?" "Yes," he said gently. "Very good." Her small smile returned. That night she couldn't sleep. She stood by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. The lights of the city glowed in the distance, and the sky shimmered faintly through the clouds. She raised her hand toward the stars, whispering words in her strange language again. Her glowing eyes reflected the faint light, and a soft hum came from her throat, like a tune remembered from long ago. David, walking past her room, stopped at the door. He watched her quietly, not wanting to interrupt. For a brief moment, he felt as if the stars themselves were listening to her. The next morning, the embassy received letters from people all over the city. Some offered donations, asking to help the girl who had returned the diplomat's wallet. Others wanted to meet her. David kept the letters on his desk, but he didn't show them to her. He didn't want her to feel like a spectacle. Instead, he arranged for her to attend a small private school nearby. "You'll learn with other children," he told her kindly. Lyra looked nervous. "Other like me?" He smiled. "They're human but kind. You'll see." Her first day at school was quiet. The children stared at her strange ears and glowing eyes, whispering among themselves. Some were frightened, but one little boy offered her a pencil when hers broke. She gave him a small smile and said, "Thank you." From that day, he sat next to her every morning. Slowly, she made friends, not many, but enough to make her laugh sometimes. Her teachers were amazed by how fast she learned. Within weeks, she could read simple books and write small stories. Her favorite subject was about stars and planets. When the teacher showed pictures of constellations, she pointed at one and whispered, "Home." No one understood what she meant, but her tone was filled with peace. David began to notice changes in her. She laughed more, spoke more, and even tried drawing. She often drew the same shapes, stars, circles, and a tall figure holding a small one by the hand. When he asked her about it, she said, "That's you and me." He felt his heart grow warm. "I'm honored," he said softly. In time, Lyra's presence brought a quiet joy to the embassy. Workers who once ignored her now smiled when she passed by. Even the guards, once suspicious, began greeting her politely. The building felt lighter, as if her gentle spirit had changed the air itself. Yet deep down, David knew her story was not finished. The world outside was noticing her too much, and the whispers were growing louder. Some wanted to know where she came from. Some wanted to take her away for study. He often stayed awake at night wondering how to protect her from the noise of the world. Lyra, unaware of these worries, simply believed she had found a place to belong. When she said goodnight, she often looked up at him and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." And each time David would answer softly, "No, Lyra, you found me." Months passed, and the world outside the embassy grew louder about Lyra's story. Her picture appeared in magazines and online articles with headlines like "The Alien Girl Who Returned," "Diplomat's Wallet," and "A Mystery Child with a Heart of Gold." People were amazed that a girl who had lived on the streets could show such honesty and kindness. Some wanted to help, others wanted to investigate, and a few simply wanted attention. But inside the embassy, life moved gently, centered around one man and one girl who had found peace in each other's company. Every morning, Lyra walked to the small school nearby with a guard watching quietly from a distance. She wore simple clothes and carried a blue school bag that Ambassador David had bought for her. She liked learning new words, reading stories, and drawing pictures of the stars. Her classmates had grown used to her glowing eyes and gentle ears. Some even found them beautiful. When she smiled, people forgot she was different. At home in the embassy, she helped Elena, the cook, prepare meals. She loved washing vegetables and stirring soup. "It smells like home," she once said softly. When Elena asked what her home smelled like, Lyra paused for a long time and replied, "Like warm light." Ambassador David watched her from his office window many times. He had grown protective of her, not out of pity but because she had changed something inside him. Before Lyra came, his life had been full of meetings, papers, and empty dinners. He lived alone, his family far away. But now the halls that once felt silent were filled with laughter, soft humming, and the quiet sound of small feet. One afternoon, he received a phone call from the government office. The voice on the other end was serious. "Ambassador Hensley, we have received requests from scientific organizations. They want permission to meet the girl. They say she could be an important discovery." David's voice was calm but firm. "She's not a discovery," he said. "She's a child under my care." "Sir," the man continued, "you have to understand her case has become global. We can't ignore it." David looked toward the garden where Lyra was feeding birds, her face bright with joy. "You can ignore it," he said quietly, "because I will." And he hung up. That evening, he found Lyra sitting under the old oak tree in the embassy courtyard, holding a book of constellations. "What are you reading?" he asked, taking a seat beside her. "Stars," she said. "This one is called Lyra." She pointed to a shape in the book. He smiled. "That's where your name came from." She nodded. "It is beautiful, like music." He noticed how her eyes shone when she spoke about the stars. "Do you miss where you came from?" he asked softly. She looked at him with calm eyes. "Sometimes," she whispered. "But I found new home." David felt a lump in his throat. "You did," he said gently. "And this home will always protect you." But not everyone shared his feelings. Some diplomats visiting from other countries began asking questions about Lyra. One of them said during a meeting, "Mr. Hensley, do you really think it's wise to keep her here?" "She could be unpredictable," David replied calmly. "She's more human than most people I've met." The man frowned. "Still, the world deserves to know what she is." David smiled slightly. "Maybe the world should start by knowing who she is instead." Word of that exchange spread quickly, and soon people began calling him the diplomat who protected the alien girl. Letters poured in from around the world. Some praised his compassion, others criticized him for hiding scientific evidence. David ignored them all. His only concern was keeping Lyra safe. Lyra, however, didn't know about the arguments. To her, life was simple. She woke up early, fed the birds, went to school, helped Elena, and waited for David to come home. She started writing small notes for him every day, short, simple sentences like "Thank you for the books" or "Today I helped a friend draw stars." David kept all those notes in a box in his office drawer. One evening, she noticed him looking tired. "You sad?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Just a little busy." She reached out and touched his hand gently. "I can help," she said. He chuckled. "You already do, Lyra, more than you know." Her presence reminded him why kindness mattered, even in a world full of cold decisions. A few weeks later, an invitation arrived from an international organization that honored acts of humanity. They wanted to present David with an award for compassion, inspired by his story with Lyra. At first he refused, not wanting to expose her again to the public. But Lyra looked at the invitation curiously. "Award, my good?" she asked. "It's for helping people," he explained. She smiled. "Then you go." He looked at her bright eyes and couldn't say no. "Only if you come with me," he said. The night of the ceremony arrived. It was held in a large hall filled with lights and cameras. Reporters waited outside, eager to see the alien girl everyone had been talking about. Lyra wore a soft white dress that Elena had sewn for her, and her silver hair shimmered under the lights. David held her hand tightly as they walked through the doors. When they stepped onto the stage, the crowd went silent. The host spoke into the microphone, praising David's kindness and dedication. Then he invited the ambassador to say a few words. David walked to the podium, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "Kindness," he began, "is not something we teach. It's something we learn when someone reminds us what it means to care." He paused and looked at Lyra. "A few months ago, a small girl living on the streets found my wallet. She could have kept it. She had nothing. But she chose honesty. That simple act changed my life." The audience listened closely, their eyes turning toward the shy girl beside him. David continued, "I was the one who received her kindness, but today I want to give this moment to her. Because she taught me something I had forgotten, that goodness can come from anyone, no matter where they come from, no matter how different they look." He turned and extended his hand to Lyra. She looked surprised but stepped forward slowly. The bright lights made her blink. David kneeled beside her and whispered, "You've already won everyone's heart." The crowd stood and clapped, their applause echoing through the hall. Some people wiped their tears. For the first time, Lyra smiled fully, not shy or afraid, but proud. Cameras flashed as the two stood together, one man from Earth and one girl from the stars. That night, as they drove back to the embassy, the city lights reflected in Lyra's eyes. "They clapped for you," she said quietly. David smiled. "No, Lyra, they clapped for you." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because you reminded them what being good really means." Lyra looked out the window at the stars above. "Then I'm happy," she said softly. And for the first time since she had fallen from the sky, she truly was. After the award ceremony, everything in Lyra's life began to change faster than anyone expected. People around the world wanted to know more about the strange but gentle girl who had once lived on the streets. News channels played clips of her standing beside Ambassador David, smiling shyly as the audience clapped for her. The photo of that moment, Lyra in her white dress holding David's hand, spread everywhere. It became a symbol of hope, and people started calling her the light of kindness. But fame was something Lyra didn't understand. At the embassy, she still woke up early, fed the birds, and helped Elena with breakfast. She liked simple things: warm soup, stories about stars, and quiet walks in the garden. The noise outside didn't reach her heart. What mattered to her was the man who had given her a name, a home, and a reason to smile again. Ambassador David tried to protect her from all the attention. He turned down interviews and refused to let anyone take her away for research. When reporters gathered near the embassy gates, he told the guards not to let them in. "She's a child," he said firmly. "Not a mystery to solve." Still, letters kept arriving. Thousands of them. Some were from children who said Lyra inspired them to be honest and kind. Some were from families offering to adopt her. Others came from scientists who still didn't believe her story. David kept most of those letters locked away, but he read some of the kind ones to her at night. Lyra loved listening. Her favorite was from a little girl who wrote, "I used to be afraid of being different, but now I think being different can be beautiful." Lyra smiled after hearing it and said softly, "That girl brave." "Yes," David said, "just like you." As time passed, their bond grew stronger. They ate breakfast together every morning, and Lyra always waited by the door when he left for work. When he came back, she ran to greet him with a smile and a quiet, "Welcome home." The embassy workers, once unsure about her, now treated her with warmth. To them, she was no longer the alien girl. She was simply Lyra. One evening, David sat by the fireplace reading reports. Lyra came in holding her small notebook. Can I read? She asked shyly. He nodded. Of course, Lyra. She opened the notebook and began reading slowly. This world, big. People walk fast, but some people stop. Some people help. I like people who help, like you. David's heart softened. That's beautiful, he said. She looked up at him. You help me. I want help others too. He smiled. And you already are. Your story helps people believe in kindness again. The next week, an invitation came from the United Nations. They wanted David and Lyra to attend a humanitarian conference. The theme was Hope Beyond Borders. David hesitated at first, not wanting to expose her again, but Lyra wanted to go. If I tell story, she said gently, maybe more people help others. He couldn't argue with that. When the day came, the great hall was full of people from every country. Lyra sat beside David, her eyes wide as she looked at the flags from around the world. When David's name was called, he stood up and spoke briefly about kindness, compassion, and the importance of helping those who have no voice. Then he surprised everyone by inviting Lyra to say a few words. The room grew quiet as she walked to the microphone. She looked small under the bright lights, but her voice, though soft, carried clearly through the hall. I was lost. She began slowly. People did not see me. I was alone. One man saw me and helped me. He gave me food, warm place, and name. Now I am not alone, I learn. People are not bad. Some hearts just forget to be kind, but they can remember again. The hall was silent for a few seconds, then filled with applause. Many people stood up, clapping with tears in their eyes. Even translators paused, touched by her simple, honest words. After the speech, journalists wrote articles about the little girl who reminded the world to care. The video of her short speech reached millions. People started new charity projects, in her name helping homeless children, refugees, and those without families. David couldn't believe how one small act of kindness had grown into something so big. Back at the embassy, life became peaceful again. Lyra continued studying, learning more about Earth's languages and stories. She loved music and spent hours listening to soft piano tunes in the evenings. Sometimes she sat outside at night looking up at the stars. One evening, David joined her with 2 cups of tea. Do you still think about your home? He asked. Lyra nodded slowly. Sometimes. But I think maybe home is not one place. What do you mean? Home is where someone waits for you, she said, smiling softly. Now, you wait for me every day. So this is my home. David looked at her, his eyes full of quiet emotion. Then this will always be your home, Lyra. A few months later, David received a call from the president's office. The government wanted to officially recognize Lyra as part of his family. When he told her the news, she tilted her head curiously. What that mean? It means, he said gently, you can stay with me forever. You'll be my daughter. She blinked in surprise. Your daughter? Yes, he said with a smile. If you want. Her eyes shimmered like starlight. She stood up and hugged him tightly. I want, she whispered. The adoption was finalized in a small ceremony. No grand speeches, no cameras, just a few close friends from the embassy and Elena, who wiped her tears quietly as she watched Lyra sign her name for the first time. Lyra Hensley. Afterward, David placed a small necklace around her neck. It had a tiny silver star pendant. For my daughter, he said, to remind you that you came from the stars but belong here too. Lyra touched the pendant gently. Thank you, Papa, she said softly. That night, they sat together in the garden under a sky full of stars. The city around them buzzed with life, but in their little corner of peace everything felt still. Lyra leaned her head against David's shoulder and whispered, I used to look at stars and feel alone. Now I look, and I feel love. David smiled, his eyes warm with pride. Because love, he said, is the brightest light of all. In the months that followed, people around the world continued to share Lyra's story, the story of a lost girl who chose honesty over survival, and a man who chose compassion over fear. Schools taught her story to children as an example of kindness. Artists painted her under a sky full of stars, calling the piece, "The Girl Who Returned the Light." And somewhere in the embassy garden, every evening, a small girl with fox-like ears still sat quietly humming her soft song to the stars, no longer a lonely stranger but a daughter, a symbol, and a light that had reminded the whole world that kindness can change everything.